Hello, everyone. My name is Rono Ghosh. I'm an international tax partner at BPM. I've spent my career focusing on global tax planning and work with predominantly technology and biotech clients, but an array of industrial and retail products companies as well. One of the pertinent issues that has come up recently with the current administration is tariffs, which are impairing the operations of many companies and causing significant amounts of risk. We've seen clients who are anxious to try to address those issues proactively. There's a lot of uncertainty in this area as far as what the exact amount of tariffs will be, as well as how best to address and manage the costs associated with tariffs and their supply chain. An initial idea of some of the things that we're doing to address the problems of our clients. And our hope here is to help you identify some methods to mitigate the costs and issues that you're facing. So the primary approaches that we have are focusing on actual changes, operational changes, which can be switching your suppliers or changing the products that you're using. Typically, we see this in terms of components and such that are being integrated into your final product. The goal is to minimize the legal and structural changes that you have, but there are different methods. One of them being if the product is brought into the US and then exported at a later date, there are opportunities to utilize duty drawbacks. These may not be available depending on what products you're dealing with and the specifics of the executive order. There's also the option to choose lowest duty rates between components and finished products, going through free trade zones. More practical issues that, depending on your facts, may just be product flow changes. And then the last piece is the first sale for export, which may be a way to mitigate your depending on your product facts. The most obvious one that we've seen in many instances involve U.S. corporations that are using contract manufacturing in the U.S. They're getting components from overseas, and we have China listed here. Obviously, the tariffs that were initially proposed for Chinese imports was particularly high, but there have been similar tariffs, not to the same level, but coming from Europe and from other locations. Regardless of the location that it's coming from, if those imports are coming into the US and are being subject to further manufacturing in the US before sale to customers or to foreign customers, the practical approach here is just an adjustment to your supply chain. It is a very practical approach and is quite manageable with regards to your operations if you're able to make adjustments as to the contract manufacturer being used. In the current fact pattern, what we did was we had a U.S. corporation that would bring products into the U.S., use an unrelated contract manufacturer to do the further manufacturing of the product. It may just be simple as assembly, and then further sale to customers both in the U.S. and outside the U.S. By switching this and finding a contract manufacturer, for instance, in Canada, or this might be Mexico, or it might be in Europe, or in other locations in Asia, depending on the location of the contract manufacturer, what you will have is a switch from your component sourcing to a new finished product, which will be based on the location of the contract manufacturer. So if assembly is going on in Canada, you can potentially switch your product to a made in Canada designation. And as a result, that product, if it needs to be imported in the US, now is only going to be subject to the tariff rate based on the Canadian rates, or or the rate for Canadian imports. And those products could be shipped out if you have a substantial portion of those product sales to foreign customers. It doesn't even need to enter the US. Now, title will pass through the US corporation and the risk would be borne by the US corporation, but ultimately the product flow itself doesn't necessarily require import into the US unless it is specifically for those US customers. And now, because this will have a made in Canada designation, you're able to reduce your tariff accordingly. So the end result here is this is a very manageable approach. It simply has to do with identification and entering into a contract with a contract manufacturer with a different location that's not in the US. And if, for instance, we determine that the rates shift because of negotiations by the current administration, you can revert back to US manufacturing or continue with Canada or elsewhere. So from a practical standpoint, there are different avenues such as this that can mitigate your exposure to these higher tariffs. And our goal here is to identify ways to fix your problems. This is just one example. Many of these will involve minor changes to your supply chain. You can also, as we mentioned before, identify different suppliers or make adjusting changes to your contracts, right? Those are operational changes. But the end result is brainstorming and trying to find a practical approach to address your risk. We've found that this has been invaluable to our clients, and we do hope that we can assist you with these types of issues.